Welcome to Nolan Knows. Let's take a look at the news. Last week we chatted about the president opening up relations with Cuba, and I suggested it was a good thing. And I do believe that it's a good idea. Now the Cubans, the Castro brothers, they've got their own ideas on what they expect. For instance, they want us to pay them for economic damage done by our not doing business with them since the 1960s. Well, this reparations idea is absolute nonsense, and we certainly ought not get involved in that. Whether or not they are sponsors of terrorism isn't really important in the issue either. The point that I was trying to make last week and that I'm going to make clear to you this week is that the government, the United States government, shouldn't get in my way or yours if you decide to go down to Cuba and tan on their beaches, or if you decide you want to buy a Cuban cigar. What I want the United States to do is to quit using force to keep us from going places or buying things. That's the way you start making inroads in Cuba. Clearly what we've done since the 60s hasn't changed the Castro brothers, but perhaps being influenced by American money, seeing American wealth, that might just make the Cubans want to change their leadership and might make them, or at least allow them, to fight for that change. I just wanted to make that point clear about Cuba. It's time for the story of the week. All right, the story of the week is Hillary Clinton, who, as we all know, has thrown her hat in the ring, intends to run for the White House. She expects to spend about $38 per vote. She's looking to get about $2.5 billion, that's with a B, in her campaign chest. This from the woman who complains that there's a disproportionate leaning of good things for the rich and not for the middle class and the poor. They, on the other hand, apparently struggle. So, where's she going to get $2.5 billion? Is she going to get it from those wealthy people that she's been saying she wants to go after? Is she going to go to Wall Street for that money? Because that's all that she really has. It's the only place she can go. The reason we know this is we've just discovered that most of her Twitter followers and Facebook fans aren't real. They're made up. They're phony. Just like Hillary, I would argue. So she's not going to get a lot of money from the little people. She has to go get the money from the big people that she says are the bad people, the people on Wall Street. I think she's going to have a very difficult time keeping the base in line. And while we're at it, maybe she could spend some of that money renaming her travel van, because calling it Scooby just isn't presidential. It's time for After the Fact. In this segment of the program, we oftentimes will take interviews from my radio broadcast, and in this case, it's Grover Norquist. I've known Grover for about 15 years, maybe even a little longer. He is the antichrist of taxes. He hates taxes, he wants them lowered, and he makes a case in a new book, End the IRS, before it ends us.
In the beginning of the book, I do the 19 different lies that politicians tell you to trick you into raising taxes. You know, it's an emergency, this will replace another tax, it's going to be paid by somebody else, foreigners or rich people, it's only temporary. I mean, anything to get in the door, like that land shark joke from Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
As soon as they can trick you, then you're in trouble. One of the lies is we're going to have an income tax, and you'll get more education, and you'll get more health care, and you'll get more police, and you'll get more roads, and we'll reduce other taxes. And that study, the book that you were talking about, points out that all the states that passed income taxes over the last 40 years, some of them had them before, once they passed the income tax, they had less road money as a percentage of the state spending, less money for education, poorer education results, poorer hospitalization results. Everything got worse. Everything got worse. Not better slowly, not better but it was expensive. Things got worse. Fewer jobs, less income compared to all the other states. Just amazing.
What Grover is doing there is making a valid point, first about how we end up in the boat where we have taxes on productivity. Believe it or not, when the income tax originally was passed, it was just the richest 1 or 2% of the American public who would have to pay them. Of course, as you know now, we all have to pay them. But that was how it was sold. It was sold to the states And in fact, the wealthy people, when they had to fill out their tax forms, used it like the red badge of courage. It was, hey, I'm so wealthy, I actually have to pay an income tax. Well, of course, now we understand that it was a lie, that we all now have to pay income tax. It's spread down to everybody who makes any kind of money at all. He also talks about not getting the returns that the states and the federal government promised. We were supposed to have all this extra money and all these other wonderful things that were supposed to happen, and instead, just the opposite. We're in worse shape economically as a result of this. These are great and valuable points because that's how the left moves. Slowly but surely, they'll tell you whatever they have to get in the door, and then it's too late. Door is closed.
What you're pointing out to us is you may not be able to slam this overnight, but there are different things that we can do along the way to alleviate the pressure, to lower the taxes, until eventually you can get where you need to go.
Look, the other team didn't create this humongous federal government that we have overnight. In a few times, they planted seeds that then grew over decades and became the monstrosity we have. We need to be clever and do it back at them to phase down the cost of government. And I think phasing out state income taxes as a model. Why do we have term limits on committee chairs? Because we did term limits at the state level. Why do we have transparency at the federal level to the extent we do? Because we first did it at the state level. I mean, everything every decent thing in Washington came from the states first. Let's do that with abolishing income taxes.
So here he's taking the idea that you move a little bit at a time, incrementally, until you get where you want to go. Learning again a lesson from the left. He points out that all kinds of innovations in governance at the federal level started at the state level. And he thinks that what we need to do, and by the way, he points out in his book that several states are now moving in this direction, is phase the income tax out at the state level. Go to a consumption tax. And if we do that, eventually the federal government will go the same direction. I wish him the best of luck with that book, and I hope it catches on. Because taxing productivity is just not helping the economy, it's killing it. It's time for Missed in the Media. The story that is prevalent in my mind that the rest of the media haven't covered is a company that processes credit cards. Apparently the owner of this company, it's called Gravity, has decided they're going to pay all of their employees at least $70,000 a year. He read a study that indicates after $70,000 or $75,000 a year, people don't get as much enjoyment. Me, I would like a little bit more than that. In fact, I would get a lot of enjoyment out of a couple of $1 million a year. That said, here's what's going to happen. He'll raise their salaries, no matter who they are, he said, to $70,000 a year. Now, what happens if that's what the pay rate is and you're going to have to hire somebody to, say, sweep the floors or deliver the mail? If you've got to pay them $70,000 a year, you're going to hire somebody who's capable of doing more than just delivering the mail. We call this job displacement. I actually think this guy is doing a disservice to people who want jobs in his company. Because it doesn't make sense. You wouldn't pay $70,000 to somebody who doesn't have a high school diploma. You'd want somebody who you can multitask with, somebody who you can take advantage of other job skills, because 70 grand is a lot of money. We'll see if it lasts, but ultimately, as nice as it sounds, he ought to just pay his employees what he actually thinks they're worth.